Jaromir Jagr's story in professional hockey is unlike anything else the NHL has ever witnessed. Picture a young Czech teenager stepping into the league during a tumultuous era, wearing a mischievous grin and an unforgettable mullet, almost as if he had breezed in off the streets of Kladno, carrying nothing but a bag of raw potential and a natural flair for the spectacular. That was 1990. At the time, the Soviet Union was on the brink of collapse. Players from Eastern Europe were still something of a mystery on North American ice, and the Pittsburgh Penguins were looking to build a supporting cast around their superstar, Mario Lemieux. Few could have predicted that the skinny forward with jersey number 68 would transform not only the Penguins' fortunes, but also the entire conversation around what longevity and sustained excellence could look like in the NHL. Over 3 decades later, Jaromir Jagr remains one of the most mesmerizing figures in hockey history, defying age in a way that seems more myth than reality, and compiling a list of achievements so extensive that it feels almost unreal. His name, etched into the record books, is accompanied by stories of tireless work ethic, a craft perfected by constant innovation, and a desire to play until his skates literally give out. He has become both a living legend and an emblem of eternal youth, even as he passes the half-century mark, continuing to lace up and defy the constraints of time. Jaromir Jagr was born on February 15, 1972, in Kladno, Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic. That birth year is crucial to understanding the man's identity. The year 1968 was a seminal moment in Czech history due to the Soviet-led invasion that crushed the Prague Spring, and Jagr's choice to wear jersey number 68 is a nod to his country's fight for freedom and independence. His father, also named Jaromir, was heavily involved in local sports. In fact, it was Jaromir Sr. who oversaw his son's early training and introduced him to hockey. By the time the younger Jagr started skating at the age of 3, his father realized that there was something extraordinary about his boy's athletic gifts. Young Jaromir had not just the size, but the coordination, power, and almost obsessive dedication to training that would become his trademark for decades to come. In communist-era Czechoslovakia, the path to playing in the NHL was rife with political and bureaucratic complexities. But even as a child, Jagr's dreams were big. He idolized NHL stars from afar and visualized himself playing alongside them, an unlikely fantasy that would soon become his reality when political shifts allowed Czech players to explore opportunities in North America. When Jagr was drafted by the Pittsburgh Penguins as the 5th overall pick in the 1990 NHL entry draft, he was only 18 years old, the youngest player in the league at the time. Yet, from day one, he carried himself with the poise of someone who had been there before. Despite language barriers and cultural differences, he gelled with the Penguins, who were on the cusp of becoming a dynasty. The Penguins had Mario Lemieux, arguably the best player in the game, and soon they discovered Jagr was the perfect complement, dynamic, creative, fearless with the puck. He quickly made waves with his electrifying style, those end-to-end rushes that seemed to blend raw power with a dancer's finesse, and the flamboyant personality that manifested in that famously bushy mullet, a playful hallmark of the early 1990s. His rookie season ended with a Stanley Cup ring as the Penguins claimed the championship. The very next year, they repeated the feat, and suddenly, Jagr was a 2-time Stanley Cup champion before he was 21. But while the mullet and a bright smile might have made him look like just another fun-loving kid, Jagr's intensity off the ice was almost monastic. Teammates often joked that Jagr lived at the rink, staying long after everyone else to shoot pucks, lift weights, or skate with a weighted vest. He was driven not only by the competition, but by an internal belief that there was always a new level of greatness to reach. Even as he soared up the scoring charts, overshadowed only by Mario Lemieux on the team, Jagr was quietly absorbing every lesson he could. He studied other players, tinkered with his technique, and transformed his body into a fortress of hockey muscles. Massive legs, powerful hands, and a core that allowed him to protect the puck like no one else in the league. His signature Jagr salute, performed after each goal, became a rallying cry for Penguins fans and a symbol of just how dominant he had become. As the 1990s rolled on, Jagr stepped out from Lemieux's shadow and established himself as the team's offensive centerpiece, particularly during Mario's absences due to injury or illness. This wasn't just about piling up points, though he certainly did, winning multiple scoring titles. It was about evolving into a complete player who could dominate games with his puck possession, lethal shot, and uncanny ability to read the ice. Defenders found him nearly impossible to knock off the puck. He had that wide, bow-legged skating style that gave him incredible stability. Once he corralled the puck behind the net, it felt like the entire opposing team would have to swarm him to pry it away. Not that it always worked. Jagr's stick handling, combined with his size, became legend. Highlight reels from that era show him weaving through entire teams, shrugging off checks like they were minor inconveniences. By the late 1990s, Jagr had ascended to the pinnacle of individual accolades, capturing the Hart Memorial Trophy as the NHL's most valuable player, along with multiple Art Ross trophies as the league's top scorer. Yet, like any star athlete's journey, his path wasn't without complications. After Lemieux's retirement in 1997, though Lemieux would later return, the Penguins had financial struggles, and Jagr's contract negotiations became a flashpoint. Eventually, in 2001, he was traded to the Washington Capitals. It was a move that came with enormous expectations and an enormous contract, rumored to make him the highest-paid player in the league. But in Washington, Jagr struggled to find the same synergy he had in Pittsburgh. Critics pounced on his scoring droughts, and the Capitals as a whole failed to achieve playoff success, leading to frustration on all sides. While he continued to produce points, the marriage between superstar and franchise never truly clicked, and the tension culminated in another trade, sending him to the New York Rangers in 2004. His time with the Rangers sparked a renaissance of sorts. Although he arrived in New York as something of a question mark, could he still dominate? He quickly reminded everyone that he was still Jaromir Jagr, one of the game's generational talents. In the 2005-06 season, following the NHL lockout, Jagr exploded with 54 goals and 123 points, contending yet again for the league scoring title. He led the Rangers back to playoff relevance and reasserted himself as an NHL juggernaut, adapting his game to the new, faster post-lockout style. By this point, he was in his mid-30s, an age where many forwards begin to decline. Yet Jagr seemed almost to defy time, finding new motivations and new ways to push his body and mind. He credited a strict workout regimen, intense summer training in the Czech Republic, and even late-night solo practices at local rinks, often after his teammates had long gone home. For Jagr, nothing less than absolute dedication would suffice. Despite his renewed success in New York, the lure of the Continental Hockey League, KHL, proved strong when his contract ended. He elected to sign with Avangard Omsk in Russia in 2008, partly because the Rangers couldn't meet his contract desires under the NHL salary cap, and partly because he had already experienced a positive stint in Omsk during the previous lockout. Many assumed that this marked the graceful winding down of his career. He would play a few seasons in the KHL, perhaps collect some big paychecks, and eventually retire. But Jagr's story has always been anything but predictable. Not only did he thrive in the KHL, but he also maintained a near-mythical training schedule, continuing to keep his body in peak condition. He wore weighted vests in practice, taped tennis balls to his stick blade to strengthen his grip, and built upon his already famed lower body strength. Russian fans, initially skeptical about a foreign superstar coming for a cash grab, quickly warmed to Jagr's commitment, which resulted in highlight reel goals and late-season surges. After 3 years, Jagr decided to return to the NHL in 2011, signing with the Philadelphia Flyers. This surprised many, especially Pittsburgh Penguins fans who had hoped for a nostalgic reunion with their old hero. Jagr, however, insisted it was simply about seizing the best opportunity. He found new life in Philadelphia, mentoring young stars like Claude Giroux, while still putting up impressive numbers. The next few seasons saw him embark on what could only be described as a tour of the league's younger teams, as he spent time with the Dallas Stars, Boston Bruins, New Jersey Devils, and Florida Panthers. Though he was no longer a perennial 100-point threat, Jagr nonetheless proved his worth with consistent scoring and, just as importantly, a wealth of experience that benefited locker rooms full of emerging talent. He evolved into a mentor figure, sharing wisdom acquired over decades of professional hockey with players young enough to be his sons. But even as he embraced that mentor role, he never lost his competitive fire. If he could get an edge, be it by doing extra laps after practice or taping a weight to his stick for hours, he would. Observers marveled that a man in his 40s could still keep pace in an increasingly faster league, but Jagr turned all doubters into believers. With each season, he continued to sign a new contract and lace up his skates. In Florida particularly, Jagr shone as a leader and a living testament to career longevity. At an age when most players are long retired, he racked up points alongside youngsters like Alexander Barkov and Jonathan Huberdeau. Fans in Sunrise, Florida, embraced him as a folk hero, this older, charismatic gentleman with a thick mane of hair still generating magical moments on the ice. In 2016, he passed Gordie Howe for third place on the NHL's all-time points list, a surreal milestone that further cemented his status as one of the greatest offensive players ever. He also soared past Mark Messier to become second only to Wayne Gretzky in career points, a figure so lofty that it feels more like folklore than reality. These moments, celebrated in rinks across North America, were the icing on the cake of a career that had already been overflowing with accomplishments. Yet, Jagr never seemed fully satisfied. He often spoke about his desire to keep playing as long as possible, not just because he loved the game, but because the chase for personal improvement was a never-ending challenge he found irresistible. As the 2010s drew to a close, Jagr's NHL opportunities waned. He had a brief stint with the Calgary Flames in the 2017-18 season that was cut short by injuries and a mutual agreement that let him return to the Czech Republic. Rather than retiring, Jagr continued to suit up for his hometown team, Rytíři Kladno, a club he owns and passionately promotes. Even past the age of 50, he shows up on the ice, occasionally missing games due to injuries or business obligations, yet always drawn back to the competition he loves. The same discipline that propelled him to stardom in the 1990s is still evident in every shift he takes in the Czech League, where local fans can't quite believe they're witnessing the same man who won Stanley Cups in Pittsburgh decades earlier. Jagr's reputation transcends the usual accolades. Sure, he has a trophy case that includes Stanley Cups, Hart trophies, Art Ross trophies, and Olympic medals. He led the Czech Republic to a gold medal in 1998. Yet, perhaps his most remarkable legacy is the example he sets for generations of players and fans about commitment to craft and the power of reinvention. Through each phase of his career, young phenom in Pittsburgh, big money star in Washington, grizzled veteran in New York, KHL explorer, traveling mentor in the NHL's later years, Jagr reinvented facets of his game to adapt to changing circumstances, always leaning on that bedrock of unstoppable work ethic. He studied nutrition, tried new training techniques, tinkered with different stick curves. Teammates routinely discovered him late at night in empty rinks or deserted weight rooms, sweat pouring off him as he repeated shot after shot, rep after rep. That intangible drive made him a unifying figure in hockey culture, someone universally respected even by fan bases he never played for. He's had his controversies, contract disputes, rumors of gambling debts, and the occasional friction with management or coaches, but those pale next to the magnitude of his on-ice accomplishments and the sincerity with which he approaches the game. He's approachable and humorous, too, often joking about his age in interviews or playfully ribbing younger teammates who can't keep pace with him in practice drills. The mullet may be tamer now, peppered with grays and trimmed short, but the childlike love for hockey remains. And that's ultimately the greatest gift Jaromir Jagr has given the sport, an enduring example that it's possible to love something so much that you commit yourself to it unconditionally, decade after decade. In an era where athletes are often overshadowed by brand building and social media presence, Jagr remains somewhat of an outlier. Yes, he has a social media footprint, but it's minimal compared to today's superstars. Instead, he has always spoken loudest through the language of on-ice performance. His longevity alone could be the subject of scientific studies. How a 50-plus-year-old can continue to compete professionally in one of the most physically demanding sports in the world. Even in the twilight of his career, when the average shift might be shorter, the legs a bit heavier, and the reflexes not as sharp as they once were, Jagr's presence commands respect. Opposing players, many of whom grew up idolizing him, take a moment to appreciate the legend who first dazzled them on grainy highlight clips from the 1990s. In the stands, parents recall how they once cheered for him with childlike wonder, and now bring their own kids to witness the story that improbably continues. His records, whether they remain in place or eventually get broken, will stand as towering achievements in the NHL annals. Over 1,900 regular season points, second only to Wayne Gretzky, 5 Art Ross trophies, a Hart Trophy, multiple Lester B. Pearson, Ted Lindsay awards, and his name etched on the Stanley Cup. And while the hockey world debates the question of who ranks as the greatest forward, or the greatest European-born player, or the most complete right-winger in NHL history, Jagr simply keeps going, as if to say he'd rather let his skates do the talking. Each shift he skates, each pass he threads, each puck he pokes into the net is one more line in a story that began in communist Czechoslovakia and wound its way through Pittsburgh, Washington, New York, Omsk, Philadelphia, Dallas, Boston, New Jersey, Florida, Calgary, and finally back home to Kladno. Fans love to muse about what might have happened if he'd never left for the KHL or had enjoyed a smoother stint in Washington. Could he have challenged Gretzky's records even more fiercely? But that speculation only adds to the mystique of a man who has charted his own unique path. To watch Jaromir Jagr at 50 step onto the ice in a modest Czech rink is to witness something transcendent, an athlete who could have long retired with universal acclaim, choosing instead to carry on simply because he can't imagine a life without hockey. He might not be posting eye-popping point totals in that environment, but he's there, guiding younger players, relishing every shift, feeding his love of the game in a direct, personal way. When asked if he'll ever truly retire, he often shrugs and jokes that maybe he'll stop playing by 60, though no one can be sure if he's actually joking. The prospect of him simply continuing, year after year, fits the Jaromir Jagr narrative better than any scripted farewell. Jagr's saga reflects the broader themes that define sports heroes: perseverance, adaptability, and the refusal to be bound by perceived limitations. He's shown the world that you can reinvent yourself over and over, that passion can carry you across decades and continents, and that you can lead while still being humble enough to learn from others. He's bridged generations, playing against legends of the past like Wayne Gretzky and Mark Messier, then going toe-to-toe with future Hall of Famers like Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin, and outlasting nearly all of them. And so, we call him the NHL's ageless legend, a title he wears with both pride and a self-deprecating chuckle. Because for all the records and the awe he inspires, at the core of Jaromir Jagr's being is an unshakable love for the game. Look beyond the accolades and longevity, and you'll see a man still captivated by the sound of puck against stick, by the rush of skating end to end, by the delirious joy of scoring a key goal in front of roaring fans. He shows us that greatness is not just about talent or trophies, but about the unwavering commitment to keep chasing that fleeting magic of athletic excellence, year after improbable year. Whether he ultimately retires tomorrow or in a decade, Jaromir Jagr's legacy is secure, not just as one of the finest to ever lace up in the NHL, but as a timeless symbol of how passion can animate our lives long after we've surpassed any normal expiration date. If hockey has immortals, he surely stands among them, still defying the clock and reminding us that sometimes legends keep skating even when the rest of the world thinks the final horn has sounded.